name is Alan Pendleton, and we joined SOLIR the year after it first came into existence. And we were members for a few years, and then we found that the course offerings were fewer and less varied than we had hoped, so we quit. And then when it became OLLI, we joined again because there were many more course offerings at that time, and have been members ever since. We both thought it was important to keep challenging our minds, and that we would be able to take courses, classes that we hadn't been able to take at college, because your majors and what you're trying to get your degree in kind of controls what you take. So I could start taking a lot more science classes than I could at college. And I also enjoy the liberal arts, so I could take particularly art classes, because I had had very little art at school. So it was mainly to challenge our intellect. We were also doing quite a bit of traveling at that time, so we felt that it would enhance what we would get out of our travel by giving greater intellectual background to it. Well, at first I was just a member, and then Mark Ratner, who at one time was the head of the curriculum committee, asked me if I would join that committee, and I did. So that gave me a much better insight to the kinds of courses that were proposed, and most of them were always accepted. Very few were never accepted. So I learned a lot about that aspect, and this was pre-computer for the most part. I mean, there were computers, but we weren't using them for doing the scheduling, so we had this gigantic butcher paper out where we could write down everything and try to get people what they preferred in terms of class dates and times, and then do some rearrangement when we couldn't quite match that perfectly. So it was quite a challenge to just get the classes together. And I was on that committee, I believe, about 3 years. And then somebody asked if I would run for the council, so I did that. And I was fortunate to be elected, so I served on the council for the 3 years that's normal. And at first I had responsibilities for coordination with Science Works, and responsibilities for landscaping and the gardening. Changing the garden was a pet challenge for me. I wanted to have wider sidewalks, basically, because I thought this was really hard when they were so narrow. And we had a landscape designer by education who was willing to take on the project, and she had great ideas. So the question was, could we get the money? So I badgered the council until we got the money, and they got that project completed. So I was happy about that. And then in the third year, we had expected and hoped that Pat would become the president, but his wife became ill, and so he couldn't do that. And so some of the council members asked me if I would do that. So I agreed to become the president. It wasn't exactly what my ambition or desire was, but it seemed to be a need that had to be fulfilled. So I became president at that time. There are a few things. One is the garden, even though that happened before I was president, but I really thought that needed to be changed. The second was working on remodeling. Joe Cologne at that time had given some money to do a design for some new structures here. And so I worked with him and with the council and with the membership on the feasibility of that. Turned out to be quite expensive, and so I think it was very hard to implement. It would have been marvelous if we could have. The building would have been a huge addition with ample auditorium space. But now we're doing this other project, which is probably going to work out just fine for a few years anyway. How long depends on how much the membership grows. So I like that. I liked the memoranda of understanding that we formed with other groups in Ashland, because OLLI, other than its agreement with ScienceWorks, really didn't have kind of what I would call close working relationships with other groups. So I encouraged the council, and it finally did adopt a memorandum of understanding with the Ashland New Plays Festival. I think we have a lot in common with them. Our memberships are of a similar age and similar interests. So I wanted to get that accomplished. There was some opposition to that because there was fear that maybe we would have increased liability or that we would have other problems or issues that came from that. I don't think any have arisen, and I think they're still redoing this memoranda. So that I'm happy about. We had noticed all the time that I was on the council that it was getting harder to have people run for the council who had a variety of experience, education, background. And we felt the council needed to have a variety. So we changed the rules in order to have a kind of interview process by the council of prospective council members to try and assure that we would get that mix. And that also ran into quite a bit of opposition. People felt that it would become a self-perpetuating council, which they really didn't want. I didn't want that either. That wasn't the objective, and I didn't think that needed to occur. But it was finally adopted, and so now we do have this interview process. And I think we've gotten a greater variety of experience, skills, education, however you want to characterize that, so that when we need a treasurer, we have somebody that has financial skills. And, when we need various kinds of background, we could get it. We had during those years a continuing challenge of getting greater volunteer cooperation. OLLI is very dependent on volunteers. All of its instructors are volunteers, and many of the instructors really need or at least enjoy having volunteers in their classroom to help. And we need volunteers at every aspect, all the committees and things. And the numbers were falling for the 3 years I was on the council. So other members of the council thought that what we needed was a professional volunteer coordinator, which came to pass, not during my tenure, but that did come to pass. And we tried various ways to encourage more volunteerism and making members understand how important it was. Finances were always an issue. We particularly seemed to be operating on a pretty narrow margin, so that if anything befell or happened, we might have to seek an immediate dues increase. I had been a member of the council when the last increase occurred, and several members were very upset by that. And I understand some people have very limited economic wherewithal, and so they want to keep it affordable for them, and we do too. We think the membership shouldn't be economically based, so we have a scholarship program to try and offset that burden. On the other hand, it needs to be paid for somehow. So George Rice had been doing quite excellent work at outside fundraising, so to speak. That is outside of the dues and the amount of money we get from the Osher Foundation. But we thought we ought to have a reserve, and Lorraine Vale, who was on the council at the same time I was, worked up a plan to have a kind of permanent reserve so that if something should happen, we would be able to at least get through a year or two without having some dramatic economic change. So that was a big issue for us. Another issue was that Sally, who had been the program director for many, many years and was, I think, beloved by almost all OLLI members, but she had spent a lot more hours than she should have, given the nature of the employment contract she had, and I think she was getting a little burned out by all of that work, had decided to leave. And so we had to get a new program director, and that new person would need to be integrated into the OLLI, I don't know, organization, I guess, for lack of a better word. So Rob came aboard, and I think he was a good choice. I didn't have anything to do with that choice. That came through the university and through the advice of other council members. But we all had a role in making that decision at the end. But as with any transition, it takes time for both the program director and the council to get accustomed to how one another need to work or want to work. So that was another important use of time and energy. Well, the first thing I learned is that it takes a lot more time than you think it's going to, or that you are told it's going to. I'm sure that's partly to encourage people to take on the responsibility, but I found I was putting in a good 15, 20 hours a week. That was about twice as much as I thought it would take, but it needed to be done, so you do it. But I think it does mean that people who are going to take on that position had better have a pretty realistic view and know they're going to have the time, because you can't really do it with just a few hours a week. You need to spend the time at it. You have a lot of coordination to do. You have a lot of meetings to attend. You have to support all the committee chairs and the committee members. All of that's kind of time consuming. And you have to work with the staff. The staff is very able, and I think we've been very fortunate on our staff. But they also have to be able to consult with you about issues or problems that they're facing, and that might also interplay with how the council operates or sees things. Well, the membership has certainly got larger. I think the variety of courses has gotten larger. I think maybe the number of what I would term academic courses maybe has gone down a little. But we have a lot more skill type courses that people seem to enjoy taking, so maybe that's just the way it goes. In looking at other OLLIs, because I spent a little time with other OLLIs, I think we're just very, very fortunate. We have very good support from SOU. Jean has done a fine job in promoting and supporting the program. And she's been pretty much a continuous presence, at least as long as I have been here. So that's been good. I think sometimes there are space issues. I mean, there's sometimes waiting lists that are pretty long for certain courses. That's, I think, unfortunate. So I think if people don't get a good portion of the courses they want, they're going to feel badly about OLLI, and they're going to, maybe not continue their membership. So we need to be sure we can kind of match our facilities to the number of courses we want to offer and to the students who want to take those courses. Well, certainly the first and foremost value is to keep their mind working and expanding. That's the primary function, and it does it very well. But it also provides a place for people to meet others of their age that they might not otherwise easily meet, and form friendships. And I think that's important for older people as they become longer-lived empty nesters, and they have fewer work requirements. I think they need that kind of social interchange and interplay. So I think it is unique in that it has people that are on the whole more similar in age and circumstances, and therefore are likely to be able to form new friendships, new associations, and learn new things, because you can learn a lot informally. You don't always need a course. But you can learn from other people's experiences, and so that provides an opportunity to do that. I think that's very good. I think it would be really an important change at OLLI if they could establish what I would call more outgoing programs, either exchanges with other OLLIs in areas where we don't offer the items that the other OLLIs might offer, or perhaps some travel experiences where they could put together interest groups that want to travel to a certain country or a certain part of the world and would like to do it with people either that they know or feel they have, similar interests and similar health concerns, all of that. But those are hard to do and they can be expensive, so I understand why it's difficult to put outgoing programs together. But I think people would really value those and use them.